Hello everyone and welcome to another live stream. Today we're going to talk about disease and diagnosing and all of that. And it's going to be different though, because I'm going to talk more about why it's so difficult and things like that, and less of how you treat a specific disease, because we have videos on that. You can look for that. We've got live streams on it. We've got how to treat ick, we've got how to treat columnaris, we've got blogs. All of that can be found on the internet. What I want to do is highlight why is it so difficult when we seemingly all have had some fish disease at some point. We think we've all had the same things. Why is it different countries are doing different things? Why is it different meds and all of that? And highlight why it's so hard as a hobbyist to get to a healthy fish. So the first thing I want to do is I want to use the example of humans, because I think all of us in this live stream will have had these interactions where if you're a new aquarist, you wouldn't necessarily have dealt with many of these diseases yet. So you might not understand the analogy and stuff, but if I put it in humans, then you should be able to correlate. So let's say you've been feeling sick for a while, right? And you're at a point where you've decided you need help, right? This could be a flu. This could be something's going on long term. Like maybe you've just got, something going on. Maybe you think, oh, do I have cancer? Do I have something going on here? But the first thing you might do is you might ask friend or family. You might ask your mom. Maybe you ask, a brother or sister, a spouse, and you try to go, well, what do you think it is? Here's my symptoms, right? And so you start with, I've got this wrong with me. What do you think it could be? Grandma? Like, you've seen a lot of diseases in your time. What do you think, Grandma? And then, you might try some of the, for lack of a better term, like home remedies. Like, yeah, Grandma says this will fix it. And so you try that, and then, a few days later, you're still feeling terrible. Now you know, okay, that's not going to work. And during that time, maybe also you're doing the Google it method. You're Googling WebMD, you're looking around, you're going, these are my symptoms. And it says here it could either be I've got gangrene in the foot, cancer, or I'm about to have a heart attack, or I just have a cold. One of those, right? So you're like, well, I'm not quite sure. And that could be the same thing. Is it velvet? Is it ick? Is this what anchorworms look like? Is this just a body fungus, right? So you're in that same, like, I don't know, because you're not super well versed with these illnesses. Then you might look it up in a book at the same time while you're trying to recover. And someone was asking me in the chat earlier today, which, by the way, we always chat about an hour before we go live, what books do I use? And I don't have a huge library of books, because I don't put a ton of value in them more than the internet or someone else. It's just another source to look. And so this book I have is the Handbook of Fish Diseases by Dieter Untergasser. And it's got pictures and stuff like that I like, and flowcharts. So it can kind of help me get to a closer, like, okay, I think from my own book research, without someone swaying my opinion, I think it might be arthropods, or I might think it's worm diseases, right? And sometimes, if you've only ever dealt with the cold, the flu, and chickenpox, when you're giving advice, you typically go, well, it's got to be one of those three. But if it's something you've never dealt with before, you don't know to go, well, did you think it could be, is your kidney going bad, right? So then, from there, you're still feeling bad. Then it's time to call in kind of a professional. And you might call a doctor or a nurse. And this is very different than what we're going to talk about going forward. You're going to call them, and you're going to try to diagnose over the phone. You might call your standard family practice doctor and go, hey, here's my symptoms. What do you think, right? And you can get some advice, and a lot of times that advice is going to be, well, stay hydrated, take your temperature, make sure someone's checking in on you, make sure you're eating some soup, or you're doing whatever, these kind of general things. Like in an aquarium, like, well, make sure the water parameters are good, check that temperature, we're going to make sure that's good. Any other symptoms going on? Like, is the food still fresh? Is, did you remember to chlorinate? Just looking for general things that might cause discomfort, because we're trying to root cause, just like they're trying to root cause of, is there any blood in your stool? Is there anything else going on? And because you're trying to diagnose through the internet. And that might be you sent us an email, we're trying to help you, we're asking for pictures and that kind of stuff. Could be you've called someone, but you've got that not in-person interaction, and you can get a little bit closer. Like, oh, I hear in your voice, on the phone you might be like, oh, I hear you coughing a lot, or I hear you really raspy, or I hear, do you have like maybe some pneumonia going on, right? You can get some auditory sounds through voice like that. So that's, it's still more beneficial than just an email or something, but it's still not great. From there, most times they're going to say, hey, if anything gets really bad, go to the ER or the walk-in clinic, or schedule an appointment and come see me, right? So when you're in person, now the doctor can ask you about symptoms you don't know that you have, right? So maybe you've been sneezing a little more, maybe you've had a little bit of a runny nose, and they know that, well, when you have ick, you have a runny nose, but you typically also have diarrhea, right? And then you're like, oh, well, yeah, I just had a lot of real spicy food the other night. I thought it was that. And I can start correlating some stuff for you. And that's what's kind of got to go on with, fish as well. Is you can only see symptoms you've seen before. So you might see fish flashing. You might see spots on a fish. You might see the tail's missing some. You might see an open wound. You might see a fungus patch, right? Any of that stuff, a bulged eye, you could kind of go, okay, I can Google that part. But what about the thousands of diseases that you can't visually see, right? For the most part, in a human, you won't be able to see cancer. You won't be able to see a lot of just, like how are you going to know that like that person is going to grow up to have MS? You can't know. But you can start noticing symptoms. If you've ever watched someone elderly continue to get older, you'll start seeing their health start to decline. So you might have known, like I've known my grandma my whole life, right? And you will see things over long periods of time. She's not as active as she was. You can see these things. With fish, a lot of times, maybe it just came into our lives. We just bought fish last week. Now they're new to us. We don't know, are these symptoms or are these behaviors that would have normally done? And something as simple as like neon tetras, they'll act way differently when they're not feeling well. So if your grandma is always super happy to see you, and you come over and she's, just says hello and is not animated, you might go, hey, are you feeling okay, Grandma? Right? Your mind already knows something's off. With fish, far too often, we don't notice the cues until there's something really wrong. Like, oh my gosh, Grandma, your hip is broken. You've fallen down, right? We don't notice it like, oh, they've been having trouble walking. They've been using a walker. They've been, their feet might have been a little bit swollen or whatever's going on. So why does that make it difficult for us to treat sick fish? One, it's because we as aquarists have a very hard time diagnosing anything that we haven't already seen before, because we don't know that that's a thing that's not supposed to be happening, right? So you have that problem. Then you also have the bias of, last time my fish were sick, I treated with this and it fixed it, right? So we don't really have a good concept of discerning between a broken arm and the flu when it comes to a fish. We just go, fish is sick, I put these medicines in, fish was no longer sick, it worked, right? But that might be where, okay, we use erythromycin to clear up a wound, like it got impaled itself on a stick in our aquarium, and that fixed it. But now it's got ick, and we see it all the time. Well, it's the only med I have. I'm going to put some erythromycin in and see if it cures it, right? We know it won't, but they're usually not 100% on what's going wrong either, especially if it's brand new icks. What I mean by that is it's only been, like, you've got a few spots on it. Like, well, it might not be ick. Maybe it's just, something. I'll put some medicine in there. And that medicine doesn't necessarily do anything good or bad. And last time it worked. A lot of times you'll see people have a fish where, it gets sick like every 6 months, and they think it's the same thing, right? So if I have a flu 2 years ago and I have the flu right now, they would be similar but different. And maybe you had the flu 2 years ago, But today my kidney is failing and it looks like I have the flu. I'm puking, I've got a temperature, I'm not feeling well, I'm laying in bed. And so if we do the same things we did for the flu 2 years ago as we're going to do for this kidney failure, that's not going to work. And so that's what I think we're running into most of the time. To make things even harder, let's say you can identify problems. Okay, bulged eye. I've never seen that before, but I looked it up. It's got a bulged eye. I've confirmed it on a few different sources. Now you start reading, and what's the treatment for that? Some people will tell you to cure anything in an aquarium, all you have to do is change water. Clean water solves everything, right? Other people like me might say lots of meds. Some people might say you got to use salt, right? And then let's say the answer is erythromycin. You might live in a country where you can't get erythromycin. Now you are going, okay, well, what am I going to do now? But maybe you could get a Melafix or a Pimafix, and someone says, last time my guy had a bulged eye, Melafix or Pimafix worked, right? The problem is that bulged eye maybe would have healed up anyway. You know, if we go back to humans, if I break my arm, right? I break my arm. If I do nothing, chances are it will heal, and it might be, like a little bit crooked or something not quite right? But it would heal. And if I ate Reese's peanut butter cups as the medicine to heal my arm, we would then say Reese's peanut butter cups fixes a broken arm, right? Look, my arm now works. But we also know, well, maybe you put it in a cast and maybe you use some pins or you do some other things to get better functionality. We also know that the Reese's peanut butter cups didn't fix my arm, and in fact, it would have healed anyway, right? So we run into that quite often of, well, I ate Reese's peanut butter cups to fix my broken arm. Now a family member has a broken arm, and I say, you know what? This is going to sound crazy, but Reese's peanut butter cups will fix that right up. It's the calcium and the chocolate and all that just bonds those bones right back up. That's the problem we run into. So we get medicines and remedies and stuff that work, that might have already worked on something already. And then we also get the problem of different opinions. Is it one Reese's peanut butter cup does it? Is it 10 Reese's peanut butter cups, right? So that's where we get into confusing things in our hobby, like scaleless fish, right? That's not a thing, by the way. All fish have scales. Some have really big armored scales, like maybe koi, right? And then some have very tiny scales, like loaches. And the tiny scales is just like skin. So our skin, right, is tiny little, essentially scales of skin. So there's a lot of online culture that would tell you, well, if you have a scaleless fish, they're more sensitive to medicines, and therefore we should only do a half dose or don't use that medicine at all, right? There's all these different theories and formulas and what's worked for them. We get that all the time with humans as well, right? You go to a doctor, he says, oh no, you take 3 aspirin every day, or you take 1 aspirin and you'll be fine. You go to the next doctor, and oh, you're going to need pain medicine for this. You go to the next doctor, they prescribe you nothing, right? You could even get, well, I feel that, random medicine A is the best for treating this acid reflux disease, right? And then the next doctor says, oh no, Tums are the best, that'll be fine. And the next one says, oh no, you should have a surgery to correct that. Who's the right one, right? Whoever gets it done and it gets fixed. So a lot of times with humans, you'll watch someone go to the doctor, they'll try something, it doesn't work, right? They'll be battling it for a while, they'll try another thing, maybe that does or doesn't work. Then they'll go on to another doctor, another specialist, try it, maybe it does or doesn't work. And if we can spend all of this money and time trying to diagnose something wrong with a human, then take the perspective back and look at the fish, right? What are we doing? We couldn't fix ourselves. It's highly unlikely we're going to be able to fix a fish. And we don't have doctors, we don't have insurance to bring this fish to a vet that maybe has seen some of these diseases we've never seen before, might have the high-end microscope we need, might have access to the medications we can't get, might have the knowledge, right? So when I developed like our quarantine trio medicines, it's no, wow, that's a dangerous thing to say, but realize what I'm about to say could come out sounding crazy and ill-informed, and I recognize that, but I don't know how else to say it. So hopefully it'll make sense, knowing that this isn't necessarily a truth. But we spent lots of time and money trying to figure out if we can't go to a vet and get what we need, like what's going to cure most of these fish. We actually did hire an ichthyologist to help us, and they ended up not giving any input that we actually ended up using long term, but lots of stuff we tried, right? And we arrived at the quarantine trio to get rid of most of the diseases that we run into. So, and the whole time, I was basically going, well, what is the aquarium version of penicillin? You know, like, oh, something's wrong, they take some penicillin, see if we can knock it out, right? And that's kind of what erythromycin, Icex, and Paraclins became. It really originally started with just antibiotics, because we were having trouble with guppies and cardinal tetras and that kind of stuff. And then once that was working really well, then it was, well, what else could we do? You know, like, okay, we've got another problem here with ick. Okay, well, can we treat those together? Can we get ahead of ick? And in my experience, you can get ahead of ick. You can usually see it when it's full blown, but when there's only a few cysts in the gills or one on the tail, maybe you miss it because you bought 100 tetras, or well, in my case 100 tetras for a store, and you didn't notice that one of them had one spot, and then a few days later they'll all have 20 spots, right? But it's the odds continually go up the more fish you have that one of them would be a carrier of a parasite. And so it became much easier to treat all of the cardinal tetras day one when they came in, and that one parasite drops off, it hatches out and dies. Got it, right? Instead of we wait 3 days, now 100 fish all have 20 parasites on them. Now they're hatching off at different times, and they're going and finding hosts, and you gotta have the meds in there, and you gotta hope that you leave it long enough. And so we found that if 70% of the time the fish was going to get ick from just being shipped or coming from a wholesaler, the longer we waited, the worse it would get. Why not preemptively treat? Because what we found was that we were going to get losses kind of either way. So maybe if we pre-treat, we lose 3 of them. And if we don't treat until we really see the big outbreak, maybe we lose 30 of them, right? So then we had internal tapeworms and that kind of stuff. Like, okay, so they're healthy and everything, but they'd be losing weight, so we added that. Now that is basically me playing doctor and going, from what I see, when people come in with these symptoms, I recommend these medicines, and I've tried them with lots of patients, and they have proven in my testing to not be toxic when mixed with each other, right? So I thought about it like humans, and I go, okay, the next step is kind of when you go to that pharmacy, someone's double checking and making sure that, oh, this med plus this med doesn't make a toxic combination. And that happens all the time with Aquarius, unfortunately. I watch it, you know, they put in a med, and then that med doesn't solve the problem. So they change half the water. Then they put in another medicine, not knowing that those two medicines, when combined, can be very deadly. Like you can have some, like a Melifix and a Pimafix, when they change the viscosity of the water, it can change the way in which the gills function, right? So let's say you have that med in there, and it's like, it's all natural, it doesn't do anything wrong, right? You can then watch, like, okay, they'll do a 50% water change. Now they're going to put medicine in there, and they put dechlorinator in there. When you put dechlorinator in there, right, it uses up oxygen as part of the process. So now you've got oxygen light water. You still have their gills that are coated in that, so it's still reducing the amount of exchange that can go on. And then you're going to put another med in there that might impact their gills on top of that. And so a lot of times what we'll find is a fish that had the cold, the flu, something that a fish typically will get past, right? actually is going to die from the medicines prescribed. So imagine you've got the flu, and now you go to the doctor, they prescribed radiation treatment, and that wipes out your entire system. You've got no immune system left to fight anything off, right? So we've nuked it completely. And so now you just die from, that bacterial infection or this other little thing. And that happens, unfortunately, way too often in aquariums. It's why we do what we do in the store, and that is always try to sell out of something all the way before bringing in the next batch from quarantine, because you can cross-contaminate all the time in your fish, right? So we know this with humans. It's very apparent with humans when you go, I've got the flu. I'm not coming over to your house. I don't want to give you the flu. You don't want to get the flu. And then you're feeling better. You might even give it a few extra days knowing I might still be contagious, right? Or if your whole family, like let's say you've got, husband, wife, and 2 kids, you all get the flu. You've all got it. You're now no longer worried about cross-contaminating through each other, right? Because you've all had it. And that's what happens in an aquarium. Like, all those fish had ick. I cleaned it all up. I don't have to worry about that anymore. But if you bring another fish in from outside, now that could bring stuff with it. And, unfortunately, we need to think about wholesalers as very, very public places if we're using the human analogy. So if you work at a daycare or a school, or maybe the reception clerk at a walk-in clinic, you're going to be exposed to way more disease and germs than the average person. Maybe you're someone who is working from home because of COVID, and you rarely leave your house. The chances of you being a carrier of just the flu are much lower than someone sitting at the ER intake going, hey, what's wrong with you? Oh, they coughed. Oh, don't worry, they covered it up. Oh, but it was on their hand, and they had touched their wallet 2 minutes before they walked in the door, and then I took their insurance card, and then I sneezed into my hand. Now I've got the flu 4 days later, and I've passed it along. That's what happens at wholesalers. You've got fish everywhere. You look at the population, you might have 100,000 fish in a facility, and there's shipments of fish coming and going every week. We have the same thing. We have shipments coming in every week. We also sell fish every week, right? And the potential to spread disease is very high. And so that's why we personally pre-treat everything, as we're trying to reduce that. It doesn't eliminate it. It just reduces it. Same thing. If you're working at the daycare, you're working with the public a lot, you can wash your hands a bunch. You could wear that face mask. You could, put up a piece of acrylic. You can reduce the odds. You can't straight up eliminate. Otherwise, we'd have done that now everywhere, right? We eliminated everything. So we can take proper precautions to mitigate how likely it is something will get sick, and we can be observant, and we can kind of go down the steps and just know that it's a common trajectory to go, okay, is it something I know? Is it something the internet knows? Is it something I can call? Can I ask a friend? Can I go to the vet? All of those are logical conclusions with your animals or your fish or your humans. So, unfortunately, with fish, we're pretty limited. Most people are going to be limited to maybe a friend and the internet, right? We all know you can get lost on the internet of like, well, there's 17 different treatments for a bulgy eye. I got to pick one and go with it, right? And in general, as humans, we'll pick the cheaper one. We'll pick the one that's accessible. We'll pick the one that's easier. Any of those things are appealing to us, right? And if you're not in the United States, like listening to me on the internet, only half my information is useful to you. When I say get erythromycin and you're in Ireland and you go, we don't have erythromycin, what should I use, Corey? And I go, I don't know, right? So imagine you're a doctor and you see something that calls for penicillin all the time. You prescribe penicillin 50 times a day, right? Now you go work in a different country and there's no penicillin to be had. Then you're like, ooh, all right, we got to get clever on how we're going to solve this. And you got to do some more trial and error. The problem is I don't have access to the medicines you guys will have outside the United States, which means I can't do the trial and error, which means you guys will need to. I can go back to very basics, right? I can say use salt to clean a wound. We can do that with humans. We can do that. You know, if you have a really bad sinus infection, what do? You can basically run salt water through your nose to help fight that off. We can do the same thing with fish, right? But that might not always be the best treatment. It's one that I know, but it might not be the best one. It's better than doing nothing, right? So when it comes back to, I didn't finish my thought with the scaleless fish, the half dosing and that kind of stuff, right? So I think there's a lot of mystery there in that, okay, well, if they don't have scales, maybe they absorb medicine faster or they're more sensitive to it, right? So let's think about this for a little bit. We have a fish that has skin, basically, like my hand, right? And there's a parasite right here. Let's say it's a tick, right? There's a tick on me, but then there's like a tick on, let's say, like an armadillo that has a lot of like tough skin or whatever, right? Or a tick, maybe a better example would be like a cow, right? They got that thick leather and I've got this thin skin. We both get the tick, right? Now, the remedy for getting rid of that tick is gonna be the same. If you use a medicine, right? And it says it takes, let's say it takes, you know, I don't know enough about this, right? But let's just pretend I do. And let's say the medicine was apply 1 drop of ointment to the area around where the tick is. When it absorbs into the skin or whatever it is, the tick will back itself out. Let's just say that's a thing, right? Now, cows have those scales, that thicker skin. And we put the 1 drop on there and the tick backs itself out and everyone's happy. But then we go, oh, Corey, the human, he's got thin skin, he's scaleless, so we're only going to do half as much medicine. We put half as much around it. A week later, the tick's still there. It wasn't enough to make that tick leave. That's exactly what happens in our aquariums. We go, okay, it needs, do I have any meds here? Do I have any? I think I've got a Kix. Here we go. So we've got that ICX, and it needs 5 milliliters per 10 gallons, I believe. Yes, 5 milliliters per 10 gallons. That is what will kill ick. So let's work in reverse here. Let's imagine you had a 10-gallon aquarium, and you have ick inside the aquarium. No fish, just ick, just parasites of ick. Imagine you had a microscope, you could see them going around the water looking to attach to fish, right? We all on the same page? We know that it takes 5 milliliters of this to kill those parasites. All right? Now, let's put in some dwarf pea puffers, right? A scaleless fish. Put those pea puffers in. Now they have ick on them. All right? They found their host. We've got ick. Do we honestly think that putting 2.5 milliliters of the medicine is going to kill the ick? Now that we have the fish in there, it doesn't get easier. They're not easier to kill. They're the same lethal dose, right? So that's the problem. But you might say, well, this medicine at 5 milliliters, it might kill the pea puffers. And that might be a true statement. However, 2.5 milliliters of this, let's say it won't kill the puffers, it also won't kill the ick, right? And when you think about it, trust me, if less of this med would kill ick accurately, they would recommend less, and they would sell you a smaller bottle, and they would make way more money. So typically, this is the lowest dose you can use. A company like Hikari and API and Fritz and all these companies, they will test to see what the lethal dose is. What do they call it? Is it LD50? Is it LD50? Lethal dose? I'm going to Google that. Yeah, LD50. Yeah, what? Okay, so it's, here we are. What is LD50 versus LC50? LD50, so LD stands for lethal dose. LD50 is the amount of material given all at once which causes death of 50% of a group of test animals. LD50 is one way to measure the short-term poisoning potential of a material. And then LC stands for lethal concentration. So the LD50, when you're testing meds and stuff like that, you test that. You basically, if you're developing a med, just like when we developed the trio, you have to figure out what is lethal. Then you go, okay, well, if we back it way off, let me step back. You figure out what is lethal, but then you also have to figure out what is so little that won't kill it either, right? And so then you want to go just above, what's the minimum you can go above killing it, so that you put the least amount of meds through the fish and the least amount of fish are going to die. So if LD50 is a standard test, right? When I was talking about those original cardinal tetras, and we might lose 30 of them if I wait a long time and I put ICX in there, the LD becomes LD30. But if I do it right away while the fish are at their strongest, and it might only lose 3 of them. It'd be LD3, right? And that's the problem I actually have with Expel P, which I know looks see-through right now, is that I believe there's further work to do on identifying what's the minimum amount that we can use that will get rid of planaria, that will get rid of camelinus redworm, right, in the freshwater side, versus what is the max. So like right here, I do believe that this might get rid of camelinus redworm. Lucky and unlucky for you guys, I haven't had camelinus redworm in the store or my fish room in like over a year. So I haven't been able to like really adjust and try and dial that in for you guys. I had lots of planaria. I was growing lots of planaria in lots of tanks, testing on it. And the standard dosage that's there will not kill the planaria from what I saw. The planaria lived right through it. Also, the snails and the shrimp lived through it as well. I know from previous stuff before Fritz ever put it out, using Levamisole, that if you go too much, right, if you raise that dosage, it will become toxic to shrimp and snails. At what point, though? That's the thing, is like, so we know that this won't do it. We know that this will do it. Somewhere in here, there is a sweet spot that will kill off planaria and kill off camelinus redworm, but won't kill snails and shrimp. And that's the spot I've got to find before I'm willing to sell this product, because I don't want to sell you a product and you go, hey, didn't get rid of the planaria. And I haven't tested on the camelinus redworm, so I have to test it before I sell it. So that's part of the problem. But that's what leads to more confusion, is a product like that, we don't know where the lethal points are. And companies should do more of that. It's very lax in the aquarium trade compared to humans and dogs and cats and that kind of stuff. And that's where you would get maybe, in the past, I would use, like a Tetra, Tetra Clear, I think? Tetra Clear, let me see. Tetra Clear Med, is that what it was? Lifeguard, that's what it was, Lifeguard. So Lifeguard was a treatment that had all kinds of stuff in it. It would treat all kinds of things, but on some fish, it would just nuke them. Boom, gone, right? Terrible. And then other stuff, you're like, it's a miracle drug, right? And that's where I think, like, well, I think it really depended on how healthy the fish was, how big that fish was. I think those really impacted it, because I was able to, way back when I was new, one of the treatments recommended for deworming puffer fish was actually breaking a quarter of a tablet and mixing it with food and feeding it to the puffer. There was no, the puffer should be this big, there should be this much food, anything like that. I always was lucky with it, but I always wondered, like, but what if it went into pea puffers versus a Mbuna puffer that's 2 feet, right? And that's where, like, fish medications in food throw me for a loop, because fish don't always eat, and if they do, you can't control how much they eat. So if we know that the way to measure whether something's going to kill something is what is the lethal dose, right? What if 1 peanut butter cup is fine, cures your arm? What if 3 peanut butter cups, right, you die. You no longer fix your broken arm. You just die from 3 peanut butter cups. And the problem is when you go, okay, we've got 3 people in the aquarium that have a broken arm and 20 other people there. Let's throw in 150 peanut butter cups. If I eat 6 peanut butter cups because I'm hungry, I'm going to die from the meds and not from the broken arm. And if we remember, the broken arm would have healed itself originally, maybe crooked, maybe not quite same functionality, but if I had done nothing, probably would have lived, right? And I know these are ridiculous examples, but hopefully it's you're putting the connections together of like, okay, so with the food, I get it, you can't necessarily control. Now, if you have one fish and only one fish, and you can go, okay, I'm feeding it 3 pellets, it's got this much medicine that's been dissolved into it, and I can calculate how much of the med has gone into the fish. You can then start to regulate it. And companies have done that, by the way. Like New Life Spectrum, not that I love them as a company, but they did have an ick medicine that was basically taken orally. The fish had to eat it. And it was calculated out, and you couldn't feed it for more than 2 days, and you had to rest the fish and all of that. But they were attempting to do that in, I think, a reasonable way. It really worked well. People that said they had the best results were like people with flower horns. Flower horns typically live alone, right? It makes sense. When you have tetras and all that kind of stuff, you can't control who's eating what. I had a dwarf frog that ate 7 pellets. Like, oh, that could be bad. I don't know. So I find it to be very, very difficult. And that's why I always come back and I go, just use the quarantine trio. I've got hundreds of thousands of fish that have been through it. And if you add up all the internet, you guys do too, right? Yeah, there's people that have like, well, I had fish die. Yes, there's no med that I'm aware of on the planet that has never killed anything ever. It's all about odds, so if the standard medicine goes to an LD 50, at what point does 50% die? Is a good working medicine LD 1? So it's like, 1 out of 100 people. We already have that with like penicillin and other, that's why they always ask you when you go to the doctors, are you allergic to anything? Oh, because I already found out I'm allergic to erythromycin. People are allergic to that, right? That's a known thing. And so the same thing with fish. You could have them be allergic to it. You could have them already be immunocompromised. You could already have, problems before you ever get the fish. And there's lots of chemicals and stuff like that enter the water that we never even get to see, breeding hormones, all of that kind of stuff. And so that's what makes it very difficult for us to talk to each other when we go, I had that problem once, I did this and it worked. Now you have that problem, we think, but it didn't work. We don't know the full-on history. I run into it all the time with pufferfish, arowanas, big things where it's like, I've had that, I've cured that, but then when I watch the other person do it and everything's seemingly the exact same, it doesn't work. Too often it's like, you were doing that already. Maybe they already had a bad liver because it had been sick 50 times before it had this similar symptom that I've had, right? Think about that. Medicines for humans, if you've drank your whole life or you've smoked your whole life, if you have either bad lungs or bad liver or something like that, and now you've got this other thing happening, the medicine might not work anymore for you, or it might be too strong for you, or, and I don't know these things, I'm not a doctor, but, let's say you had really bad lung capacity and then you get, liver cancer, let's say. But maybe the radiation or they got to do hurts your lungs so much that you're actually going to die of lung failure and not that. So it's not an option. So they got to figure out what other crazy solution can we do, because you have a history. That's why there's a chart and a history on all of your animals, all of your humans. There's going to be that. That doesn't exist for fish. You can ask a breeder maybe like, hey, did you ever do a thing? I think I did a thing. I don't know if it was this batch or the last batch. You can maybe know what the store did. You won't know what the wholesaler did. You won't know what the breeder behind them did or the other wholesaler behind them did, right? In general, you're just trying to get things healthy. So that's where, when you adopt a dog and it's a stray, you don't know the lineage. Like, oh yeah, grandpa and grandpa dog. Grandpa and grandpa, did I say grandpa and grandpa? Grandpa and grandma dog, they had bad hips. And then their kids had bad hips. And now I've got this 6-week-old puppy, the odds of it having bad hips is much higher. But if I don't know any of the history, I don't know. Like maybe I should be trying to feed a supplement, or maybe I should be making sure they're not, like my little puppy loves jumping from the top of the stairs down, and I already know that that's going to, put wear and tear on those joints that I want to avoid. So with fish, it's crazy difficult, I find, to do any real analysis for the average hobbyist. And even when you start looking at, you talk with ichthyologists, you talk with wet vets that are real wet vets, not just like they went through like a weekend program and now they're like, I can write a prescription for a drug for a fish, but like really have studied it and really done well. Not that you have to do well, but made it one of their areas of focus, right? If they are having problems, and it's still like a worldwide thing where people fly around the world to help diagnose disease in salmon farms and ornamental fish farms and all of that, how is, Johnny, who's 15 at home, who just got his 8th batch of fish in the first year, everything's been going good, to have a reasonable chance of success with that? That's the hardest part. And you don't have that high-end microscope. You don't have all the books that you want to be able to compare the slides to. You don't have the previous knowledge. You don't have that person to call. You don't have insurance to take it to someone who does have all that stuff to go, hey, this right here is this virus found in rainbow fish. It's this virus found in angelfish. Oh, that is this virus found in koi. Instead, we have fish that get sick. We go, ooh, yeah, looks like those koi AIDS. Yeah, it must have been that, because I seen that before. Everything died, right? And sometimes there is no known cure. That doesn't mean there's not a cure. It just means there's no known cure. And we write it off. And that happens all the time in our hobby because there's not enough kind of money and research around it. Happens less in the food trade because there's a lot of money riding on it. And as you go up the chain, right? So if you have a pet, you got a neon tetra you spent $2 on. People don't spend a lot of money on that. You might have a dog you spent $50 adopting or $200 adopting. You might have a dog that you bought from a breeder for $5,000. You might have a parrot that's 29 years old you've had forever and a day. You're going to spend a lot of money to try and fix that thing. But that $2 neon, most people won't. And so there's not a whole lot out there to really guide us well to know which meds work with each other, which meds are extra hard on some species, right? So I've been able to see that salt cures so much, but is crazy toxic to dwarf anchor catfish. And what I mean by that is, like, I could put a cup of salt in 10 gallons with cardinal tetras, right? And a lot of people say cardinal tetras are, weak or sensitive or whatever, right? And they can handle it pretty much just fine. And then you could put 1 tablespoon of salt in a 10-gallon with those dwarf anchor catfish, and they died within like 5 minutes. It was crazy to see. And we thought it was an anomaly. So we actually tested it again, going, yeah, something with those fish. Like maybe they had already been, something had happened before we got them. Because you wouldn't think this tiny amount of salt would just be lethal. But it was. And we'd never seen that with any other fish before. And these are an armored catfish. They got lots of armor on them. They're not scaleless or anything like that. And we had done, that 1 tablespoon of salt. Plants don't even care about that. But these anchor catfish, wow, terrible. After the second time, we did not test again with salt. So we just went with other medicines. They did fine. Now, did we get 2 batches in a row that were bad? That could be. And I could be telling you something, and if you take me right at face value, that's how an internet myth gets started of like dwarf anchor catfish, crazy, susceptible to salt, never use salt. Or did I get 2 batches in a row that had something done to them and they can tolerate salt? I'm not exactly like, well, that's a good point. Because I'm not like a drug company or anything like that, I'm not a guy who's going to sit here and be like, okay, it's been 5 years. Let's try it again. Like, I'm not trying to kill more fish. And even if I did, I would only figure out, okay, so they can tolerate 1 tablespoon of salt But what about 2? What about 3? And then if I could figure that out, that's still only one fish out of thousands and thousands of types of fish. So I think no one really tries to take it on, and we just end up with it's all communal. This is what happened. Imagine if every time there was an illness, doesn't matter what it is, cancer, failing organs, broken arm, flu, imagine that your only source was to walk in to a lunchroom somewhere and be like, all right, someone diagnose what's going on. You seen this before? What do you got? Chocolate milk and donuts. Cured your grandpappy. Okay. No one else has seen this. No one. Guess we're going with chocolate milk and the grandpappy cure. That's just the way we work, because too often, we have the care forum. Every week there is something that I've never seen before. That's a crazy bug thing I've never seen before. I haven't seen it do that. Weird. Use that medicine. Didn't cure it. I've cured it 100 times in my own fish room. Never had a problem. That stuff happens all the time. So you end up kind of going with what is the advice that most people are recommending. And then the minute you get something that works for you, like, oh, grandpappy's chocolate milk and donuts fixed whatever that was, I'm going to recommend the same advice. Now that guy and I'm in the same lunchroom. You come in with that same thing, we're both going to say chocolate milk and donuts fixes that, right? And it could just be that the thing was going to get fixed either way, but now you've got 2 people saying chocolate milk and donuts. And so you never really know until radical scientific paperwork has been done and all this testing, and that just doesn't get done, unfortunately. Not often enough to be meaningful to us as hobbyists. So that's why it's so hard, and why I would say don't get discouraged. Like, it is fairly easy to run a healthy tank because humans, animals, fish, all of that are designed to be able to fight through. In the wild, they live on with parasites. They live on with all this stuff because they have to. There's no one getting rid of it and that type of stuff. So, there's just some differences there. I don't want to say like it's black and white, but when ick falls off, that fish might have swam a mile down the river and then it goes to another one, right? So there are some differences. I'm not going to say there's not, but the good news is fish and plants and that kind of stuff, by design, they're pretty hardy. They're made to not be eaten by other fish, hopefully, to weather disease, temperature change, these adverse conditions. And I would love to do some kind of giant study long-term that was able to like necropsy fish from home hobbyists and see what is the percentage of fish died from the initial disease versus fish died from over-medication. I think it could be, and I don't know this is purely speculation, but I wouldn't be shocked to find out that we actually kill more with meds than we do with the original disease. And I get it. We're terrified that the disease is going to spread to everything and take everything out and lose it all. So we'd rather try and get it at the beginning and not have that happen. And so that is why I just say the Med Trio has worked for us. It works well for us. It doesn't cure everything. I don't get that, I don't seem, and this is, even though we treat all the fish, it's not like I checked every fish we've ever sold at the 8-year mark and see the meds we put it through originally. Did that ruin its kidneys? I can never know that. I can say all the fish that lived in my fish room have always had the Med Trio, and they all, for the most part, seem to be thriving. That doesn't mean they haven't died. That doesn't mean they haven't gotten sick. That doesn't mean that thing didn't have a birthing complication. That thing had a tumor. That thing got some disease I could never cure. That doesn't mean that doesn't happen. It just means the majority of what I got going on works pretty well, at least in my soft water, with my lower pH, with the way I feed, with the way I do fertilizers, and the way I light, right? So I guess the end of it is, don't lose hope just because you're bad at diagnosing fish diseases, because I bet if I put you in a hospital, you'd be just as bad with humans. And we know tons about humans. It's just we don't have the schooling, and the school doesn't even really exist. So know that, the best we got to hope for is getting a little bit lucky, a little bit of education. If it's something very common, we got a good choice. or a good chance. But, when you get into obscure things, who knows? And it can wipe your fish room out. And I would say don't let it ruin nature for you, but do try to learn from it. I always, every time I kill something, my biggest hope is that I will learn what killed it, or I'll learn what saved the last couple fish so I can try it again down the road when I see that. Because then eventually I might get to a point where I could say, X has happened to me, feed it chocolate milk and donuts. It works every time for some crazy reason. That's how we get to, oh yeah, feed snails Tums. That seems to work, right? And that's where, we get to garlic may or may not be the answer. Some people swear by garlic cures ick. I've yet to ever see it cure ick. I'm not saying it couldn't, because I could see how it could, but I've read studies that also show where it doesn't work. So, and I haven't had that experience myself. I know people that say it worked, but it just leaves doubt in my mind. And I think most of you have the same thing of I think I know how to treat ick. I think I know how to treat a bacterial infection. I know how to get a few things, but the minute you run into something weird, all the confidence is out the window. I've never seen this parasite before. Who knew? Like right now, if my whole fish room broke out in Costia, I would not be happy. Or Velvet. Velvet, I am at an LD. I'm at LD 80. 20% of the time I can beat Velvet. And that might even be optimistic. I had a good run there where I was treating it no problem. I was doing a salt, and I was ready to be this is how you do it. And then it was 6 month run where we were just on it. We're yeah, we've got ick, or we've got Velvet knocked out. We know how to beat it. And then ever since, it's 1 out of 20 times we might beat that Velvet. Same protocol. So is it a different strain? Is it what's going on? We don't know. Maybe someone's pre-treating who the vendor we were ordering from. I don't know. I can't figure it out. And we don't have a clinical study going on it, so we may never know. And that's what's the most frustrating part is going, I thought we were there. I thought we had that, because the Med Trio won't beat Velvet, by the way. Otherwise, I would say, I could fix that. And salt, in our experience, won't do it either. So, in our experience, maybe it'll work for you, right? This person says, garlic and warm water works for me. Really good. I won't buy any medication for ick. There's no reason to. Garlic is boosting the water and the water temp. So I would say to that statement, if garlic would do it alone, every wholesaler would just have garlic in their water. Just as simple as that. Same with my fish store, right? Now, you also said, what? And water temp. Well, it's scientifically proven that high levels of heat will fight off ick. It'll fight off bacterial infections too. So that's kind of where, that's the difference there is sit in a sauna, eat donuts and chocolate milk, it'll cure the flu. And it might be elevating the temperature in the sauna is what cures the flu. The donuts and the chocolate milk don't have an impact at all, actually. So, I could say the same thing. If you eat a Reese's peanut butter cup while you apply the Med Trio, it will cure your fish, right? And then eventually you guys would try I don't have the Reese's peanut butter cup, so I'm just going to do the Med Trio. That worked too. I guess the Reese's peanut butter cup is not an essential part of it. And I haven't done enough research, and so you could be totally right. You could be that, yes, garlic is the key there. The papers I've read would read contrary. My experience would be contrary. That means maybe I didn't have the right concentration or something like that, but that's what makes it hard on the internet is you could easily say garlic, warm water, and salt kills ick. And it's salt can kill ick. Warm water could kill ick. I don't know about garlic, but you can keep adding things on. I could add on that a multivitamin, garlic, and warm water will cure ick. Or better example. Oh, I took it inside, but Vitachem, garlic, and warm water can cure ick. That would be a true statement. However, the Vitachem is not curing the ick. It might be fortifying the immune system. That might be a good thing to do, but it's not curing the ick. But if you guys watch me do it time and time again on the internet, it would become, you would try it. And then you have success. You'd be that's the way. And that's kind of how these for lack of a better term, these home hobbyist remedies keep going. Now, the good news is I don't think garlic does any harm at all, right? But I also wouldn't want you freaking out like, oh man, I don't have garlic. But you could turn the temperature up and that will work for most strains. By the way, when it comes to like ick, there's a ton of different ick strains. So, for instance, there are some countries, the farms never get ick because the water temperature is always 85 to 90 degrees because it's really hot there, right? But when they do get ick that comes in for something like that, they're really tolerant or really temperature resistant. And so a med typically will work better. So that adds another layer of complication to it of this has always worked before. Why isn't it working now? And it's like, oh, well, they were already at 85 degrees. Like, you know, discus getting ick, if they've always lived at 85, if you bring them home from the store and you turn it to 85, likely that won't get rid of the ick. You might have to go to 87, 88, somewhere up there. But you can go to, that's why a lot of discus breeders, this is how this kind of happened, is a lot of discus people only ever kept them at 90. Because at 90, bacteria wouldn't really survive, parasites couldn't survive, but then eventually things adapted and would start surviving. And then also you had to feed insane amounts because the metabolisms were racing, and you had to water change insane amounts because the beneficial bacteria struggled to live. And there was less oxygen in the water. There's all these downsides as well as the upside. So it's a very convoluted and difficult thing. And you know, I didn't want to make Steel Angus there a spectacle or anything, but you know, just to point out that even one statement, it's like, I don't know the truth. I can't tell you that garlic wouldn't help or wouldn't be the thing that fixes it. I can just, my own bias, like I talked about earlier, is like what I see will come into play, and I'll say like, oh, that doesn't, I don't think that works. And you know, for me personally, like I want it to work. Like a New Life Spectrum Thera A that's got a lot of garlic in it. How easy would it be if you just had to feed food with garlic in it and it didn't exist anymore? Like, we all want that as hobbyists. That would be amazing and great. And so typically I approach everything with skepticism when it's like, so if something was this easy, why wouldn't we all be doing it? Right? Like I don't see why we wouldn't feed garlic food or why we wouldn't keep garlic in wholesale facilities and just eradicate ick forever. There was one study I read, and it was like basically they were able to kill ick with garlic, but it became such a high concentration that it was absurd. And I'd have to find the study, which, you know, gets buried in the internet. But basically they had said if you had one person working 8 hours a day at this farm, because they were testing at a farm, chopping up the garlic and putting it into the water, they couldn't get enough garlic into the water in a work week to be a lethal enough concentration of garlic to kill the ick. Now, that would have only been one strain of ick. That would have been one strain of garlic. It would have been one guy cutting up garlic. It would have been at that temperature at that farm. It would have been those specific fish. There's a lot of variables. But you do got to kind of go, well, you know, if someone spent the time to do all that, am I going to be the guy to fact check and double do their work? Most people like myself and maybe you guys wouldn't. So yeah, I think it's time to get to the Q&A part. I've rambled on for a solid hour. That's the monologue. Hopefully, the goal here was not to be like, now you know how to cure fish, but to give you the confidence to know that just because you're not curing a fish doesn't make you a worse aquarist than the next person, right? And that, you know, and that's kind of why the joke always goes, like with Dean and myself and anyone else who's been in the hobby a long time, the only reason we have more success than some others, I'm not saying I have more success than you, but maybe someone else. The joke is kind of, I know how to do it because I've killed more fish than you have. Because in general, you learn how to avoid things. If you can avoid getting sick, you know, keeping a healthy aquarium helps you avoid illness or illness outbreak, right? Not crowding helps, right? Not cross-contaminating helps. Not feeding spoiled food helps. There's a lot of things you can do to help avoid the diseases. Like Dean, if I'm being 100% honest, he is amazing at avoiding disease. He's really good. His husbandry is amazing. when it comes to meds, he's not crazy experienced. Now, he can treat most things, but a lot of the meds he used to use back in the day aren't available anymore. So it's like the thing he would use, you can't even get. And then at a certain point, he got so good with his husbandry, and he brings in so few fish. In a given year, Dean might only bring in 2 species to his fish room, right? Very rarely does he ever add anything in. And so even though he's been doing it for 40 plus years, now he's at a point where very few fish come in, most fish are leaving, they're healthy, and but he got there by killing lots of fish, by running into the same things we're going to run into, and no one enjoys it. No one's going to enjoy, killing a fish, just like no one enjoys losing a dog. And what I mean by that is, it'll be fine. I'm going to run inside and I'm going to grab their leash. And you do it and your dog ran off, and now you got to spend a day and a half finding it, or 2 hours, and you go, wow. You learn, I will always bring the dog in with me, or I will always close the gate because it's not worth the other side of it. And the aquarium is the same way. You'll learn that I'll always quarantine, I'll always do this or that because the other side of it's not worth the risk. And there are times worth the risk. Maybe your aquarium blew out and you had some sick fish and you spent thousands of dollars to buy those fish. You'd put them into another established tank with healthy fish going, I'll treat them all. It's worth it. I understand the risks. My floor is flooded. I've got this going on. It's a worthwhile thing. But you'll learn all that over time. And that's, don't give up. Don't get too discouraged. Trust me, you're gonna get bummed when you kill stuff. No one's like, oh yes, killed another tank of fish. Mission accomplished. I get that. But just know that you've got a lot of things going against you, and take everything you hear from another hobbyist with a grain of salt, myself included. Don't, just because I just went on this, monologue rant, don't think what I'm saying is any more truthful than anyone else. I'm just a YouTuber. I own a store. I'm a nerd, and I got a fish room, right? That doesn't mean I know more than the next guy. There's probably someone who's never kept a freshwater aquarium that knows 10 times more than I'll ever know about diseases, because they're studying saltwater and they're studying rivers and lakes and all of that. And, so just know that even my advice, look at it with a microscope and go, well, do I think this is going to work for my situation? And that's, short of hiring a different professional, that's the best I got for you guys. All right, let me jump in here. Wow, a lot of new members. Thank you very much. Scroll down here. Michael Young says, the Med Trio absolutely changed my fish buying experience. I used to lose 30 to 50% of any new fish. Now I lose none, even from big box stores. Yeah, it's, so you might, let's say your LD rate, your lethal dose rate or whatever was 30 to 50% of the fish you would lose. If you can use the Med Trio, and maybe it only drops to 10%, right? So you lose 10% of your fish. That's still way better. And that's what we wanted to do. We had losses, and it was certain species of fish that would really be like, wow. Guppies and cardinal tetras and puffers, because they'd bite on each other. And I know there's got to be more. I just can't think about the top of my head. But some of them were just like, the losses were huge. And we're like, how do we improve that? I don't think we'll ever get to a point where we ordered 10,000 fish, not a single one died. I don't think that's practical. But how do we get it so the least amount will die? And the Trio has gotten us that far, and it's good enough that I don't further develop. So I'm not like going, well, what if this one med would be better? Now, if someone brings out a med and it's seemingly really good, I do test it. We've tested other meds from Fritz. We've tested other meds that we've seen come out, because there could be the next best medication, right? But so far we haven't seen it. And we've tested all the organic things, and I've talked about that in the past. There's a huge push for organic medications or organic solutions, because something like a Melifix and Pimafix, it can be sold all around the world because it doesn't have medications in them, right? So if that worked, amazing. It's like salt, works, amazing. But all of these Herbtanas and that ilk of stuff, I want one to work. I've yet to ever have one work well enough. And so maybe it works like it takes 6 months to cure it. I don't have that kind of time. Like, I give it like the week. If it can do it in the week, then it's on par with some of these other meds, and I'd be worth like, okay, let's work on this. But yeah, I mean, even one from Fritz, they have an ick medication, and we got a gallon of it, and we were doing A/B. Robert was doing A/B tests. We'd get Cardinal Tetras. You guys would watch them in the unboxings, and we would put them side by side, same row and everything, same amount of Tetras, because we'd have multiple bags, and we would do our trio, and we would do their ICX medicine, and you would watch these guys get ick and die. And then, it wouldn't cure it. And so it's either that product doesn't work, or it doesn't work with the way we do it, because we have water changes and we have to redose. So that could be a problem. Could be that we're too hot or too cold. Could be our pH is wrong. But we do test things to try and find out other stuff, because why not? Wouldn't it be great to have an herbal product or an organic product that could go worldwide that would work? Of course it would be. And, if that ever happens, we want to be the #1 seller of it. Like, why not? So we do test stuff, but unfortunately, it's kind of like if you got a Reese's peanut butter cup and you're like, let's try this other candy. Not quite as good. And unfortunately, it's like these don't work in our experience. Because if it doesn't just work as well, I would still let you guys know. Like API, erythromycin, and General Cure, they're basically the same thing as Paracleanse and Maricin. They're just more expensive. So I'm not going to tell you they don't work. They're just more expensive per, gram or whatever. But they still work. And salt works. Like, I don't really make any money selling any salt, but salt is amazing. It just doesn't jive with plants very well, and that hurts. All right. Here's Justine Fott for his charity. Nice. Yeah, he delivered a bunch of stuff, I think, last week to the shelter. He's a good man. Oh, no. There's a looks like a fun drive to getting Jimmy to eat baby brine shrimp. I don't know how that got out of control. Jimmy and I keep talking about that. Everyone wants to see me eat baby brine shrimp. I only remember just doing like one little quip about it, which that just made the video. I'm that trolly usually with Jimmy and Dean all the time. It just usually doesn't make the video. Yeah, the 800-gallon move is coming soon, Fish Tank Barn. It's Dean and I are meeting tomorrow. Then I'll start assembling. I think after the New Year's, gotta make sure everyone's got some time. And I gotta tear down the 800-gallon, as in all the sand. Plants got to come out, and then schedule how many people do we need, how do we do it safely, both in transportation and kind of distancing each other and getting the right people together. So I gotta orchestrate it still. Patrick, I discovered Corey in the coop last year. Thank you for the incredible depth of resource. Well, thank you for hanging around for a year. I hope to be able to do some traveling next year. Not quite at the breakneck pace I'm used to, but I do like going to talk to other, what I call experts, people that are doing stuff. If we go to a discus farm, I'm going to put more stock in what they have to say versus me of like, I keep 2 tanks of discus at my store. Oh, your whole life revolves around discus. You'll probably know a thing or two more than I do. And there's always stuff to learn. And so I hope to do some more of that. I want to go back to Peru. Yeah, I find a lot. I learn a lot when I can visit other countries and other stuff outside of my own store. Getting out of your own comfort zone, you learn more. So, referring to an old tank syndrome in the last video, do you suggest if your tank is going good to skip a water change if you know you're gonna add new fish? I think the big thing to worry about there is, are your water parameters going to be fairly in line with what they're coming from? So, like in the totes where I haven't changed water in a year, right? I still check up on their water to make sure it's not like crazy acidic or anything like that before I would put fish in. So you don't need to change water if your water looks great compared to what they've got, it looks the same, why change it, right? Now, there could be compounds that we can't measure for, that could happen, but in general, I would say if your tank looks good on paper and it looks similar to what the fish are coming in from, you're probably safe, and I'm not sure you're going to get a whole lot out of doing that extra water change. How do I get rid of Camellinus redworms? They're sticking out of all my guppies. The only way I know of to get rid of them is to use Levamisole or fenbendazole. Now, my advice is this. This is what's worked for me over the last 15 years. Go to selectaquatics.com and buy his Levamisole. It'll be fresh. He'll ship it to you quickly. Mail might take a little bit because it's a little bit, delayed. But it's a med that does need to be stored at a correct temperature, right? And then follow his directions. It's worked for me. That's basically what I've got. And that's just making me think off the top of my head. Do they have any directions on here with Levamisole? Because that's what... Let me make sure it's Levamisole. Yeah, 113 milligrams Levamisole hydrochloride. Let's see. They recommend what temperatures to do it. They use it between, so it says 6.4 to 7.6 pH and temperature 68 to 86. But the weird part is, I'm going to go to the Google, and find the right page for you guys. Let's see, what is it like? I believe, let's see if this will. It doesn't say the storage temps, but I know there's basically a problem with it getting too hot. Yeah, so I'll bring this up here real quick. So I'm looking at Levamisole HCl, which is, I think HCl stands for hydrochloride, I believe. And I'm not trying to call a company out or anything like that, but so stability and shelf life, bulk Levamisole appears to be stable in the bulk form at 60 Celsius for at least 4 weeks. Let me go, because I remember it being like, if it got like above 90 or something like that. What is 60 Celsius? 140 degrees. Like, because if that's the true metric there, well, it could get it at the back of a semi truck maybe, but I feel like, yeah, I'll look into that some more. But yeah, one of the reasons I like to buy from Greg is he buys it fresh. And he'll ship it quickly, and it's been stored correctly. And it won't be expired either. So I know he ran, the reason why I know this is he ran some problems where he was buying it from like a feed store, and it wasn't being that effective, and it was a temperature. But maybe it's only a specific one that he provides. Well, now I want to make sure I want to be, see if I can find his meds on his website. I'll bring you guys along here. We're on selectaquatics.com. Levamisole for sale. Oh, it comes on this cool little carrier now. That's cool. I wonder if it looks 3D printed. Still kind of cool. Light resistant case. Yeah, meds typically are, you want. If there's temp in here. Nope. So it doesn't say. But you can follow all of his directions. And this is where I would buy it. Let's see. For a 10-gram kit. Oh, well, that's it, the kit as well. I would highly recommend getting the kit. So the dosing is the hardest part of this, by the way. For $17. Yeah. Yep, I would buy it. One side dose. Oh yeah, one side will dose 15. Oh, so he's got it cut so that the 10 will treat 10 gallons. That makes it way easier, because back in my day, I did have to split it up with a razor blade, and you'd get a packet of it, and you try to get it into 10 equal parts, because that would treat 10 gallons, and it was rough. So All right, that's where I would go. If it was, I think it's just like a little bit of meds he splits up. Yeah, I'd be tempted to sell it, but I also like it when people can have their own gig going on where it's like I don't need to sell everything. This guy, Greg Sage, if you haven't watched his videos on our channel, stand-up breeder, love the dude, support him. All right, how do I medicate fish in a planted tank? I know it's off topic. All the quarantine trio that we use works in planted tanks. A lot of meds will, some like copper-based ones won't, salt-based ones won't. There's some others that won't, but most, I don't know, is it most right? A lot of meds will work just fine in a planted aquarium. So don't worry about it too much. How much, I can never say this word, anthraxin is really needed to make colors pop. So it does help enhance colors, but in general, I don't go out of my way to feed any extra of it. So, you know, like Dean's fish looks amazing and he doesn't go out of his way to do it. So I have seen some breeders that do use it and it can get some crazy good results, but I'm not sure how much. Yeah. How long after I quarantine? Wait, how long should I quarantine after med trio use? I would say it kind of depends on what are you risking. So like with my Mbuna puffers, for example, I might quarantine 3 months before I introduce. But like at the store, it's like 1 week. At home, maybe a week or two. I always kind of ask people, are you in a rush? Like let's say you had a quarantine tank and you've got a main tank. And you say, I buy fish once a month. Can I put them in the next week? It's like, well, you could, but why not wait till the 3rd week and then let your tank rest for a week and then go, if you know you're going to go buy fish, like the longer you quarantine, technically your odds get better. At a certain point, though, you might not get any benefit out of it. So, you know, if you're trying to learn how to build a house, day 1, you know, like, okay, well, you know a little bit. After like, oh, I did it for a year, like you would know more. But at a certain point, I've been building houses for 72 years. You're probably not learning a whole lot at that point. So it's like, well, where do you stop getting as much benefit? And I feel like, you know, let's say they're in quarantine for 1 week, another week, you get a lot of benefit out of going, okay, they're looking pretty good. Another week after that, decent amount. After that, it's like, well, they've looked great for 2 weeks now. The odds are going in my favor at this point. But if you're going to redose, like if you watched a video on the other channel, my More Aquarium Co-op, you'd see that you'd be redosing for internal tapeworms anyway. So maybe you'd be finishing out that and then go ahead and moving forward. If I've missed any super chats, I apologize. And thank you from Orlando and Joel. Oh, Joe. Oh, one came in right here. Since my apartment only allows 1 tank, can I quarantine in a plastic tub? You could. I also question, like, if they care about having aquariums, they're probably going to care about that tub filled with water. And if you're not that worried about that, just use another aquarium. Like, I honestly, this is stuff that gets me into trouble. But for most people that I've talked with, and my own personal experience, this is not what you should do. This is just my storytelling. In general, if you do a very good job with your aquariums and the husbandry of them, and they're presentable and they look good, on average, my landlords and people I've talked with don't raise too much of a problem. Now, you might be allowed to have 1 aquarium, and maybe they say it's up to 55 gallons. If you put an 800-gallon aquarium in there, pretty much everyone's going to have a problem with it. But, you know, maybe you go, well, I did 2 29 gallons, and they both look really good, and they're in different rooms, and it doesn't look like a fish room, and usually you get someone going, When I had aquariums, there were a lot of them, they looked really good. The people that would come in, like if I had a maintenance guy or something like that, they'd be fascinated, like, wow, this is amazing. Tell me more. This is cool. And I think you do better with that as opposed to, like, they walk in and be like, is that goldfish dead? The water's green, like the water's halfway down, you know, like is that a stinky turtle in there? Like I think you can skew the odds a little bit. So for yours instance, I think, you know, a 10-gallon plastic container versus a 10-gallon aquarium, I think it's all the same. You have the same chance of knocking that thing over, flooding something. Yeah. How many Mbuna African cichlids can be in a 40-gallon? I would say, I'm just going to pick a number and say 12. Like, you could go a bunch one way or the other. You could, you know, it depends on species and how many different species. But let's just pick a number and go, 12-ish. You know, you're doing peacocks and it's one male and 17 females. Like, you can pull that off versus, like, it's all male Mbuna tank. Like, well, like, you know, you got a bumblebee in there. That's crazy. All right, I'm grabbing some natural questions. Have I ever had a chance to use the Nutrafin freshwater test kit by Hagen and Fluval, and what do I think of it? I have. I've tested it exclusively, and I remember the takeaway notes being that it's something like the ammonia test takes 20 minutes. Is that the true thing? I think it's the ammonia test. Fluval ammonia test. I want to say it's one of them is some crazy long wait time where it's like, you've got to be kidding me. Let me see if it's this ammonia one. Do they have directions? I can download the manual. All right. Oh, geez. Let's see. I'm looking. Let's see if I can share that with you. All right. We're looking at the instructions here. Yeah, right here. So number 5, so like here's the steps, right? Number 5, wait 20 minutes for the color to develop. And I was just like, how can I sell something when this is so much worse than an API test kit, a test strip? And I'm not saying no one out there is going to wait 20 minutes, but what are the odds in which you wait that long or forget or whatever? Like, that just seems like, how do I willingly tell people, like, you guys should buy this? Oh, by the way, it's a 35-minute process to test your aquarium. Like, it might, you know, even if it's more reliable, it's just like, wow. It's a real tough sell, I think. And that was in their test kit. So that's, I have tested it, and it just seemed like we got to do something better, guys. So the funny part was, I was talking to Fluval people, and that was my feedback, was like, are you serious? And they're like, no, it doesn't take that long. And I was like, this is right in the directions. They're like, oh, well, let me ask the scientists why. And they were like, oh, it's more accurate. And I'm like, but 20 minutes versus 5 or 1 or what? Like, test strips are like 20 seconds or something, you know, and 20 minutes. I just think that's because with one aquarium, it's fine. But I know, like, you guys, on average, you have 5+ aquariums. That just means you're only ever going to test for ammonia when you really think there's a problem, and you're going to go, 20 minutes? I don't have time for that. And so it won't be used. And that just seems like not a good solution. What are the best ways to keep aggression in South American cichlid tanks down? My Jack Dempsey seems to be bullying my Oscar and my blood parrot cichlid. They're all the same size. So let me see if I can find a good example. Let's see. What are those called? See if I can find the right image here. Okay. We're going to go here. So I really like these bamboo marine land plastic plants. They used to be under a different company. They're kind of chintzy. They don't hold up forever and a day or anything. But they're 3 feet long, and they kind of expand out quite a bit. And what you're trying to do, I'm trying to see if I can find an aquarium here that would be, this is similar, maybe right down here. Let's see. Oh, smallest picture ever. Great. Not helpful. But what you're going to try and do is create line of sight blocking. Of course, like, I've done this a billion times, and yet no one else got a picture of it, or I'm not typing in the right thing. Well, maybe, it's probably going to be another small picture. Dang it. I need not Amazon pictures here. We need like some actual. This might be, no, that's Amazon. All right, we're gonna use this picture. All right, so you see this cylinder aquarium, and you've got in the center here, you've got the plant, right? Now, if you had a Jack Dempsey on the right-hand side, and you had your blood pair on the left-hand side, because they don't look at each other, they're not gonna fight. But they're gonna use this as a dividing line, a territory line. So, if you didn't have this plant, it might be Jack Dempsey sees all of this is all of his territory, or whoever's the aggressor, right? When you put this up, now you can do the out of sight, out of mind. As long as I don't see you, I don't have to chase you, okay? Now, in a larger aquarium, which you probably have, not a circular shape, you might put 3 or 4 of these. You might take 2 of them front to back, right? So that you can create a nice block, and they'd have to go way up at the top to go around them. And so that way when they hunker down, because we know that a Jack Dempsey is a cave dweller, give him a nice cave, and he'll want to be hunkered down, and Blood Parrot might be up over here, minding his own business. They don't even see each other, out of sight, out of mind. The only aggression you'll get toward feeding, and if you go all the way across the top, they can go up here, they can go up here, not a problem, right? So that's the way I would do it. I want to say these plants are like $7 or $8. I actually don't know anymore. They used to be that. I haven't bought any long. Well, on Chewies.com they're 15, so yikes. It's Marineland. I want to see if it'll take us. It'll actually take us there. Yeah, it looks like they're about $15. And if you get 1 or 2 of those, that'll help you quite a bit. So, I don't sell them just because they do fall apart. They've got a weak link to them. Like the way in which they're built a little bit. Let's see if I can. Like these little parts, they can be torn off by fish, and sometimes they'll be a little bit broken in the package. But the other thing I like to do, I think I had them in the 800 gallon at one point, is use lead weight to weight them down. Like, so if you got big fish pulling at them, the other thing you can do is reset territory. And what does that mean? That means when you do your maintenance and stuff in your gravel vacuuming, move the cave, move stuff so they don't just learn like this half is mine always. It's like, no, now you're in the middle. Now you're over here. Now this is happening. The other thing you can do as well is get yourself some fish that are dither fish. We have a video on dither fish if you don't know what that is. But basically you want fish that'll swim back and forth all day long. Maybe get yourself some silver dollars, some rainbow fish, Congo tetras, something like that. They're swimming back and forth. And then the Jack Dempsey is like, oh, I'm so angry, he keeps coming and going, coming and going, coming and going. And eventually they're just like, yeah, people are always coming and going. I don't need to chase them out because they're just going to come back. And that will usually diffuse the situation a little bit also. Now, not any one solution is guaranteed to work or always will work. But, it's the aggression ideas that I've got for you that have worked for me in the past. I did a lot with African cichlids. How do I feel about native fish keeping, and do you ever think it'll take off in the hobby? I don't think it'll take off locally. We want, as hobbyists, we want ease, right? So right now, if you came to my store, you couldn't buy any natives really. Maybe we'll get, that a sunfish or something every once in a while, but are people going to go out and collect them, the average person? No, they're going to go to a store. And so a lot of them don't have a ton of color anyway, and they get kind of big. So I don't think it's ever going to be like hugely popular because of those reasons. I could be wrong though. Everyone could be like, I want to be a nature guy and conserve and do all that and like that. That would be cool. I just don't think that's where we're trending. So yeah, I mean, like rainbow shiners, they're like one of the coolest looking fish, and even they can't make their imprint, it seems like. How many koi pandas in a 29 gallon with 24 ember tetras? I would do a 12 pack, but I'm crazy. Have I ever heard of Father Fish, strong advocate for deep sandbed method? Yes. Deep sandbed methods are awesome if you like keeping a bunch of sand instead of fish and plants. I'll fight anyone, when they're like, deep sand beds are magical. They get rid of your nitrates and they do stuff. Like, what do plants do? Oh yeah, that exact same thing, and they look amazing. So for me, it's always like, yes, it is a thing. We used it way back in the day when we didn't have access to as many plants, we didn't understand them as well, and in saltwater, but in freshwater, I don't think it's visually appealing to see 6 to 8 inches of substrate, and you see all the different layers of bacteria growing, and you're taking up all that swimming space for the fish. So that's my own personal take. Now, people can do whatever they want, and I've done that stuff. All aquariums for me are enjoyable. It doesn't matter what it is. Like fish and plants and just bugs are fascinating. So really, it comes down to, is a super deep sand bed, is that good for your life, right? So I could play devil's advocate here and say, like, deep sand beds are terrible because if you live in an apartment, on average, you move every 2 years in the United States, which means it takes up to a year for that bed to really become active. 6 months, it starts becoming really good. After that, next 6 months, really good. Then you're going to have that much sand, too heavy to carry. Now you got to break it down. And so you're only getting 50% of the time you're going to enjoy that aquarium, right? But maybe you've got this giant aquarium, or maybe you've got fish that don't dig, or whatever it is, and you've decided that's what you want to do. By all means, do that. I don't find it to be beneficial. I like to change fish too often. I like to keep fish that'll dig sometimes. I like to swap out my plants. I don't like the way it looks. I like to have more water and more swimming space for my fish. In general, I feel like if you do a deep sand bed, you should upsize the aquarium size to accommodate that. You know, if you're keeping angelfish, right, and the angelfish is going to get this tall, which is, 10 inches or more, and you're keeping it in, maybe a 29-gallon tank. How tall are they? They're like, I can't remember now. So whatever I say, people just tell me I'm wrong later. 29-gallon tank is 18 inches tall. So if you're going to use up, let's say 8 of those inches, let's be more conservative. Let's say 6 inches on a deep sand bed, right? You've now got 12 inches, and you've got a 10-inch potential fish, and then you wouldn't put it all the way to the top. You'd actually have some space because you don't want the water to go over. So now you've got it where the fish is almost touching top to bottom, where, in my opinion, a 29-gallon tank with a normal amount of substrate, let's say it's 2 inches, right? That leaves 16 inches. You got that 1 inch for water, and now you've got like a 5-inch clearance, right? 16, yeah, 5 inch, yeah. So he's got like a 5 extra inches of swim space in theory. So I don't know. I guess like everything, there's pros and cons to it. I don't see the pros of it outweighing the negative effects of it. Now, what I do see a lot of people do is they romanticize things of like, well, if you go with an anoxic filter, if you go with a deep sand bed, you don't have to do water change, you don't have to do all this stuff anymore. Well, I'm not doing anoxic, and I'm not doing and I'm not doing a deep sand bed, and I'm not doing water changes. It's that classic, oh, penicillin, chocolate milk, and donuts cure that. Like, no. The penicillin's doing it like the not doing the water changes is consistent between all of those. Like plants can do it, the deep sand bed can do it, anoxic filtration can do it, live rock and saltwater aquariums can do it. Like there's so many ways to get there. What is the best vehicle for you? Are you driving a truck? Are you driving a Camry? Are you driving an RV? Get there how you want to go. But I myself am not a strong advocate for it just because of the reasons I've mentioned so far. It doesn't make sense for the way I keep fish, I suppose. As a wall stat guy, I have concerns about anaerobic bacteria in deep substrate. I would say that I've never done, I don't have 10 years straight aquariums running and those tests to know, do I really worry about that? I've never really had bad tanks with deep sand beds or dirt or anything like that. I've never really had anything go too wrong. But I also find I'm like, oh man, when I replant or I do anything, I don't like that. And then I get the same-ish results without having that downfall. So I try to go with, what's the least path of resistance to me enjoying my hobby? That's really what everyone should be asking. It's like, what's the least that I can do to maximize my enjoyment? And everyone's got different enjoyment. I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say in saltwater aquariums, a deep sand bed, when you see different sandworms going through there, that is fun for me to look at. I'm not saying it's not. But when it comes to me maybe keeping that aquarium, I might approach it a different way, and I want to do it this way because I'm getting more enjoyment out of it. So, like for me, I would much rather grow mangroves than a deep sand bed because I like to look at, oh man, look, my mangrove's growing. Cool, right? Whereas, look at my deep sand bed. You see that black patch right there? Yeah, it's really eating some nitrates for me. Cool, huh? Am I still planning on using a bug zapper above your tanks outside? I still have it hanging there. I didn't plug it in this season though. I might. I do like it. In the new house, there's so many bugs. It's out of control. I was daydreaming about buying a bug whacker, as it's called. Let's see if I can find the bug whacker. Well, bug zapper's coming up, but I know bug whacker is a thing. I'm gonna have to dig for it. But essentially what it was like a really low-powered weed whacker. It just like kind of spun at a fastest pace, but not like, you know, like it's loud like a weed whacker. And then it had a light bulb above it, so bugs would fly towards it and get whacked down into the water. You're supposed to put it at the end of a dock if you're fishing. And the reason being that when it whacks the bug down, it would move on the top of the water and the fish would come up. And whereas a bug zapper, when it gets killed, it falls and doesn't do anything. And then also, when I researched it, that extra layer, the zapped bug will have less nutrients than a bug that got whacked down. So I might do one though at the pond. That being said, there's no fish in there yet. So, but I do daydream about that stuff still. Zappers tend to attract more. Lights definitely attract bugs, and if you put them in the wrong spot, you can definitely make things worse. But if I'm feeding fish, attracting bugs is a good thing, I think. You're more food, more free food. So I wouldn't put it like right next to my barbecue, of course. Floaters and plants in a Daphnia tank. Baby brine shrimp big enough for bettas. Typically, bettas will eat baby brine in my experience. And then plants. So the fear I have with plants in Daphnia tanks is that they'll consume some of the calcium, and the calcium is really important for the Daphnia. And then you can't put any fertilizers in to keep the plants going. Like once they expand, eventually they'll consume more than the Daphnia produce. They'll start dying off and all that. So I've never reached the good balance yet. I've tried it a bunch though, and I am lured by like, ooh, what if I could just reach the balance? It'd be amazing. Like, yeah, I have a feeling that algae is probably just better at it. Plus, I welcome green water because that feeds them. Meds that work if there are corridors in the tanks. No white spots, gasping for air, bumping into core. Community tank with angels, red-tailed sharks, cooloches. I mean, all the meds in the quarantine trio we use on Corridoras every week. With the symptoms of like gasping for air and bumping into the core, I would start with something basic like maybe a paracleanse and see if there's not something going on with the gills and that kind of stuff. It makes it hard because it's like, or you could just use all of them, like you were quarantining them, and then maybe you've already quarantined them though. Like maybe you already did that and it didn't work. It's where's that patient history chart of like what has already been done, what should we be thinking about here, what's most likely the cause. But yeah, I would probably, basically in my mind right now, I'm going probably between paracleanse and Icex. One of those is going to cure what's going on there. Sight unseen, you know, calling up a doctor going, sounds like here's what I would try. I'll prescribe you some paracleanse, some Icex. Call me in 3 days if it's not fixed, type of deal. Wonder shells for Daphnia? I haven't tried it. I know for sure Zoomed banquet blocks work really well. With the Daphnia, I'm not sure if... I think I have tried it, though. I haven't tried it a lot, but I think back then I was making my own. I don't know if I've specifically tried Wonder Shell. The only thing I'd be worried about with the Wonder Shell is the dechlorinator, like crystals or whatever that's in it, because I know that dechlorinator will kill Daphnia usually. The chemicals in it. I don't know if they're the same chemicals, but that's the thing. I would definitely like get some Daphnia, put it in a 10-gallon with same water, put one in there. If they thrive, by all means, great calcium source. But you can make your own with plaster of Paris, or you can buy Zoomed's Plankton Banquet blocks. They'll have spirulina algae in it as well. So as it dissolves, it'll add more food in there for them, which is good. Recommendations to prevent Hydra? Mostly, it's funny. I proofread an article or a blog post that we're putting out in the next couple weeks about Hydra. But most of our recommendation would be don't feed super small foods, keep fish big enough to eat them, and use some snails, because snails will eat all the little small food particles and it will starve out the Hydra. But there's more to the article than that, but that's a little quick synopsis for you. The gills are the most focused area they bump into stuff with. So they might be like scratching and flashing, which, you know, if there's parasites in those gills, they don't really, like, the scratching's not going to help, and you won't be able to see it. So I would try one of the two. You've kind of got a 50-50, like Icex might get it or Paracleanse might get it. And I can't, you could do them both at the same time, technically. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Because then I also like to know, like, if you use one and it cured it, then you know if it breaks out another aquarium, it's probably the same thing, and you know which med to put in there. You put in both. You know, it's like if I tell you you've got, let's say you've got diarrhea, right? And I tell you to take Imodium and Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Well, we know the Imodium is what's going to stop it, but if you had done one, I ate Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, diarrhea didn't go away. I ate the Imodium, diarrhea went away. Now when you get in the future, you know, oh yeah, take the Imodium, not the Peanut Butter Cups. I don't like bug zappers. They don't attract mosquitoes. They only zap moths, katydids, and other non-pest bugs. I think a lot of that has to do with where you're at and the types and stuff, because definitely we would have tons of like dead mosquitoes below ours. Not in proportion to probably how many mosquitoes are around, but definitely. I'd also get wasps and bees and stuff too, which that's not great. I'm just saying it would attract some stuff. Corey, I'm old school. You don't say, Brian. I use an Undergravel filter. Would someone... I use an Undergravel filter. Would someone needs to increase flow if they use more than 2 to 3 inches of substrate? So I think it's a question you got to like talk all the way through. 2 to 3 inches of substrate, when new, wouldn't need more flow because it wouldn't have collected enough gunk yet, right? If it was 5 inches and there was no gunk, I don't think the resistance would be that high either. That being said, I do think if you had 5 inches and it was been 6 months versus 3 inches in 6 months, it would take more flow to pull the channeling water. Channeling water means it finds a path, right, through that gravel with the 5-inch one. Now, that's why we recommend gravel vacuuming and things like that to help break that up, the channeling of the water and getting the debris out so that it would take less. So that's kind of, to me, that's kind of like the deep sand bed and stuff method of like, if you're like, I want 5 inches and I want the flow to still be good, you got to upsize, maybe you got to use some power heads to pull that off, right? But maybe you're like, oh, well, I want it to be as easy as possible. Can I do 2 inches and just air and gravel vac it once every 6 months? And the answer to that is probably yes. Now, what's the better option for you? I don't know. Maybe you're like, oh, I don't mind doing this one, or I'd rather pay the money and get the bigger power heads and do less work. So you got to figure out, like on one hand, the less substrate, gravel vac once a month, if you're replicating that 100 times, saves a lot of money. If it's only once though, maybe it's worth buying the couple extra power heads and doing it that way. You know, like, oh, I travel all the time for work, I'm not home, I don't have the time to service that, I'm about to have a baby, whatever. You know, different stuff for different people. Have I seen the aquarium or the channel called Aquarium Cop? Nearly fooled me. Yeah, there's been a few. They used to hang out in here. Then it made it really confusing. There was Aqua Cop, Aquarium Cop. There was like another one too. But yeah, I've seen them. First time watching from the Philippines. Well, welcome. And thank you to Quentin Fogel for becoming a member again. Or re-upping, or whatever that's called. Reaffirming? I don't know. We're still trying to get it at 2,000. We were talking a little bit earlier, and at 2,000 we'll do a like a little members only taco thing. We'll set a night. We'll set a Tuesday night, and we'll all eat tacos. It's gonna be like a Corey Nurm ASMR, just like you'll get just like a solid 2 minutes of that. It'll be great. You could get more content like that when you sign up for the Aquarium Co-op membership, let me tell you. You'd think you'd get some more knowledge. Nope, it's just straight up taco eating sounds. I gotta do that video now just out of fun. Is the co-op what you imagined it would be when you first opened? And at this point, what do you hope to change in the hobby? So in some ways, it's way bigger than I ever thought, and that's awesome. In other ways, we have not nearly accomplished what I thought it was going to be. I thought we would have had maybe more local breeders. I thought, because I was running the breeder award program, and it seemed like everyone was like, I can't get money for my fish. It sure would be nice if someone bought them. And then when you try to work with these people, they make it incredibly difficult. Like, well, I can only deliver Saturdays at 2 p.m. when you're most busy. I can only bring you 7 fish. I can only, like, oh geez, they're making this like, no wonder you're not able to sell these. But you know, we've been able to buy from Dean and a few other people in big quantities and make that work really well. So I'd really hoped that we would have found more people that can go, hey, you need 100 corridoras every week? I will breed you 100 corridoras every week. And we could pay, you know, a reasonable price, just like we get from the wholesaler. And that, it does, we keep adding people slowly but surely that are ready to make a business out of it and do it correctly. But it's a tough road. I thought it was going to be easier. I also wanted a lot more locally sourced products. But what I found was when we did do it, people, we would like, you know, different foods and stuff, people start liking them, and we keep selling, and all of a sudden they'd be like, yeah, I'm not really making any money, and I'm not doing it anymore. And then we'd have all these people that were disappointed that we would sell them something they can't get anymore. Like, my fish will only eat this. Now what am I going to do? You're going to kill my fish. And it's like, oh, geez, this is rough. And so that was hard. Even when we were like, well, we could charge more, right? I've been through a few different foods that way. And it's like, well, we could charge more. People are willing to pay it. But at the end, locally, it was so expensive to produce a lot of this stuff that it wasn't really economically viable for the producer of it. And they would run into some issues, like one of the foods, a good shrimp food, used stinging nettle, and they can only collect it sometimes in the year, and it was hard to get a hold of, and so that wasn't really working out. In fact, when they stopped making it, I tried to buy the recipe, that didn't work either. So I really wanted to be more local was the Aquarium Co-op thing. My vision was that it would be like more of like a co-op grocery store where, and what I mean by that is like, oh, look at this. We're at the honey aisle. There's 15 different local people that make honey, right? And like, oh, we're looking at food. Here's 5 different foods that are made locally that I could choose from and I could try. And here's locally bred fish. And that just never really materialized. And I'll take half the blame for that. Is like, I could have tried harder. It was definitely easier to go, well, I could just sell Akari Vibrobites. Like, it's in stock, it's made well, I like the food. It's got marketing behind it. It'll be there in 6 months. And we've tried other products too, like we tried some 3D printed products and that kind of stuff, and that it just never is really taken off. And so that's a little sad to see. I still keep thinking, like, how do we solve that? We tried doing every month where there'd be a plant swap, and we thought that was a good thing, like for the community building. And it devolved, unfortunately, into people only showing up with basically like duckweed and like random moss with algae. Not everyone, but let's say 30% was that. Another 10 to 20% people would just buy a plant from our planted tank and then enter it in because it was like a plant swap, right? And then the people that were really bringing in super rare plants and cool stuff, they were getting discouraged because there was like 1 or 2 of them and they were already like trading plants. And so never be anything new for them. So they would drop off, and eventually it devolved into like, well, there's a couple of plants you could buy from us anyway. There's 4 lots of duckweed. There's 3 of Java moss. 6 lots of water lettuce. And people just be like, my number got called? I don't want any of that. And so, and we tried, so then we started doing where we would order in rare plants. Spice it up and make it so we changed the rules so it's like you could never bring the same plant more than once. And that's where you got that person that brought duckweed. They'd be like, okay, duckweed, frogbit, red root floater, water lettuce, water hyacinth, val, Italian val, jungle val, corkscrew val. I ran through those. All right. Let's see what else. Ludowigia arcuata. And it was just like, this is not the spirit of this. So that was demoralizing as well. And it was great because you'd have it like kind of working. You'd have like half the group that were like, they get it. All right. And then you'd have this other half that's like, they're trying to work the system. And it was like this pulling apart. And so we never figured it out. And I keep thinking about, all right, maybe we'll try again. I've got some more ideas. How could we make that a little bit better of a dynamic between the 2 groups of people? And then the second part of your question, what do I hope to change in the hobby through my influence? I don't know. That seems to change fairly often. Making new products or improving products, it's kind of self-fulfilling, so we just make more money. So now that we're able to do that, we're kind of good. I would say kind of good at doing that. There's products on my desk I can't show you that we're working on that, so we've become a fairly well-oiled machine at going, we want to do this. Let's start working on that. We'll bring that to market. We'll plan that out. That's kind of going well. But the influence is still that I would like to have is like my lasting legacy now is trying to get people to maybe connect with nature a little more or appreciate the nature aspect of it, of like, I appreciate the illness. I appreciate the way those fish are eating and just this brown fish that no one cares about. And because it really did change for me the first time I went to Peru, seeing fish you keep in the aquarium in the wild blows your mind. It's not like seeing like, hey, that's a trout, because most of the time you see the trout, it's already in the wild. But seeing it how they actually live and the mulm and the grime and the adverse conditions and all the rocky substrate the corridors are on, even though they can only live in sand, the internet says, all of this stuff. And so even like today, it's like, try to keep people positive in the hobby, try to give them a lot of information. I'm trying to do that. And then hopefully getting them hooked enough to want to do some of this stuff in nature. And you don't have to go to Peru or anything. You could just be like, I'll sit at the pond. When we first got our new place, I was sitting at the pond just watching like bugs in the water. Like, that's a bug I haven't seen before. Like, I wonder, and I'm thinking, I wonder if koi would eat that bug. I wonder if that bug is harmful to the koi. I wonder. And a lot of that for me is just spending time away from my phone and the internet and things like that. I'm going camping now. We went the day after Christmas, Jimmy, Bob, and myself, and we basically make sure we go far enough away there's no cell phone reception. And yeah, we're getting rained on. We've got a campfire. We're cooking hot dogs on the fire, that kind of stuff. But the goal is just to like, ooh, look at that moss. Like, a good example. I don't think we filmed any of it, but Bob spotted this like crazy fluorescent yellow stuff in the roots. And I was joking like, oh, they're alien eggs, and we're looking at it, and I actually think it was like some kind of fungus or sap or something of a tree that got pushed over, but it was crazy. And then I started thinking about what would it have been like if you had seen that like 200 years ago, and you're like, fluorescent color, you may have never seen fluorescent color before, right? Like right now we can go like, oh, you buy a fluorescent paint or whatever, but I was like, I wonder what that would be like. You'd harvest it, and then maybe you try to turn it into a paint. You're like, look at this, like when the sun hits it or the moon hits it. And so just that whole line of thinking is, I guess, what I'm hoping to be able to impart on bigger groups of people, which I get. If you're watching this now, you're like, dude, I just want to know how to keep my fish alive. And I would say my hobby has changed and evolved a lot over the last 15 years of like, yes, that fish looks super cool. It is cool. I like keeping it. And then I get to a point where it's like, oh, they're doing something cool. I like that. Now it's, I want to make this harder or change it and observe that. And then I want to see other stuff I don't even know. So a lot of experimenting in that. And so I guess that's the legacy, is how do I get people to a point where they just want to appreciate what's happening, good or bad, in their aquarium, and see what's going on, and not so much chase, can I fit my 7th red-tailed catfish in this 55-gallon aquarium? Will I be cool then? Will the internet say I'm cool? Will I get validation? Will Instagram? Not like, obviously social media has been very good to me, but it can also be very bad to people. We all know the fish police and everything. And I just think the fish police is kind of a group that think they know a lot in a hobby where we know almost nothing, honestly. We honestly know almost nothing about this when it comes to all these types of fish and plants. And we know concepts. We know plant allelopathy exists, where one plant with another plant in an aquarium will go to war and try to kill the other one. And yet we don't really know anything about it. Like, well, which ones kill each other? Which ones shouldn't go to? I don't know. We know so little about this hobby. And so I think it's better to take a stance of, well, let's just try to learn as much as we can and see what happens. And that is very fulfilling. And it's when you get, I don't want to call it the upper circles, but when you get in a room with lots of people, or not lots of people, but other people that have kept aquariums for a long time or kept a lot of aquariums, you almost like, you start going like, oh, they experiment too. Like, they've seen stuff the internet doesn't know. And so you will gravitate towards each other. Like Dean and I will run stuff by each other. Like you would think, or I would think, not knowing what we talk about, but that Dean would never have to ask me about anything, but he'd be like, hey, you ever seen this before? Or he'll say, hey, when you were at that wholesale facility, did you see this? Or what about that? And I'll do the same thing. Like, my fish are doing this. They always do that, but they're doing this now. Have you ever seen that? Oh, yeah, I've seen that before. Weird. Okay, I wonder what that's about. And so you just try and learn, and he might want to see it when he comes over, and I want to see it when I'm over at his house. And that leads to the final thing of like really trying to get the hobby where it'll build friendships. We've been thinking about that a lot lately, Jimmy and I, and Bob, I guess. And it's like, well, what is it that we can do on YouTube that the internet doesn't already do, or doesn't do a good job of? And our thought was showing camaraderie and friendship, because like Bob and I have been friends for a long time, Jimmy and I have been friends for a long time, Dean and I, and we all can still show up and have a good time, even though we all kind of do different aquarium stuff. We all have different jobs. We all, Bob loves rainbow fish. I don't really care about rainbow fish that much, right? Dean loves rams and discus. I don't like rams and discus that much. I love live bearers, right? And none of those guys love live bearers like I love live bearers. Then you got Jimmy. Jimmy loves to make things look beautiful and do all that kind of stuff. I can appreciate it, but it's all different. I've done stuff like that. We've all done each other's stuff, but we all have a different area of focus, I would say. And that's something that I hope that more people will partake in. I get it. You're a cichlid guy. I admire the passion you have for the fish you like Zenzo. Zenzo loves his brackish water tanks. He loves his African cichlids. He loves the fish he keeps. I'm not necessarily in love with the jewel cichlids. But when I see them, I go, oh man, jewel cichlids, those are pretty fun. Because when they have a batch of fry, it's insane. You got like 4 billion of them. and they get so red and they look so good. That doesn't mean I'm going to keep them, but I appreciate him keeping them, knowing, oh, when I went through that, that was super fun. I know what you're feeling right now, and that is a good time. And so I think too often the hobby attracts, I'm going to call it loners. It's usually the hobby starts as a single home, one or two people that want an aquarium. It's not really a whole family thing for most families. And then rarely do you find people that really get fish friends. Like, yeah, they might talk to their fish store a little bit, and you might see someone else there, and you're like, oh yeah, fish are cool, huh? But it's rare when you're like, oh, friends came in to shop for fish, or they're going to the club meeting, or they, like tomorrow, Dean, myself, and Jimmy are gonna work on the fish room. Dean doesn't get paid. Jimmy gets paid, right? But he could also say, I got too much work to do. I don't want to film that. And it wouldn't work unless we wanted to hang out. But we all know it's probably going to be fun. We'll probably get some food somehow. And we'll work on this thing knowing that it will probably be fun down the road. We all know that, we could all be in the same room. We could be talking and in front of you guys. Instead of just me right now, it's 3 of us or 5 of us or whatever. So all working towards a common goal, knowing that we all have each other's fish backs. And the same thing. I don't get paid when I go and I help Dean put in a new water heater in his fish room. We got to move a fish rack. It gets to that point where you just help each other knowing that you're friends. And that's through fish. And I hope that will become stronger and stronger. It's really hard to do through the internet. I get that. Because it's really hard to take on tone and not get agitated. And you don't know that, like, oh, wow, that person just had a life-changing event. And now is not the right time to talk about this. Where in person, like, ooh, yeah, you're having a rough week. Yeah. Hey, if you need any help, let me know if you need any help. I can feed your fish. I can do whatever. That's a different thing. And so I don't know how to bridge that gap online yet. It works a lot better when we go and do shows. People, we all go out to ice cream. We have dinner, that kind of stuff. I think helps bridge that. We've got our local club finder on the website that you can go and find where your local club is, which I know COVID has crushed all the clubs at the moment, but hopefully there'll be a huge, uptick when we're all, like, even right now, I'm jonesing to go to a club meeting, even though, like, during the normal year, maybe I'm too lazy to go. But now I'm like, oh, I couldn't go? Well, dang it. Now I'm definitely going to have to go. So it's a long-winded answer, I suppose. A couple of super chats, and then we'll turn it over to Bob, because Bob's going live. Opinion on the Med Trio on use on guppy fry. I've done it. I haven't noticed heavy losses or anything. I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to do it. Like, I think there's the inherent guppy fry have to be more sensitive than adults. That just seems like a thing. But I've never been like, I've had to treat aquariums with maybe there's 20 adults and hundreds of fry, and I've never been like, oh, that killed all the fry. I've never seen that, but I'm hesitant to go, don't even worry about it. Let's see. I know this is said way too much by now, but I have a 20 long planted with German blue rams and 6 Reminos. Could I add Simlis cories? 20 long. If it's just one ram, probably, yeah. There's a lot of space in there, and if it's just the one, if you had a pair, I might be worried they pair off. They have eggs, and now those guys got to stay away. But yeah, just one, I think that could work. Ooh, last minute super chat. Thanks for the live streams, chock full of info. Any plans for one on New Year's? I don't know yet. If I'm being honest, I really, really enjoyed spending time with my wife on Christmas and not live streaming. I almost live streamed because I was itching for it. I really do enjoy live streaming, but there is something to be said for spending time with your loved ones that I've willingly neglected for about 5+ years now. And it was like, wow, this is really, really nice. Like, I feel refreshed and not just absolutely drained on Christmas. And so will I do that on New Year's? I don't know. On one hand, I'm like, oh, I'd love to stream on the New Year's. On the other hand, it's like, what if we did just hang out together? Huh. So I don't know. I'll talk with my wife. She's always like, you should live stream. So many people want to see it. And I get that. But I also feel like, well, I could take it off and do one on a Monday or something, and so I'm not sure yet. And there's been some other people stepping up. Some other people did some Christmas live streams and that kind of stuff, and so maybe I'm passing the torch. I don't know. I could wake up that morning and be like, you know what, got a live stream, or maybe not. Don't know. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to do, a lot of work to do, and for all I know, maybe Dean and I will be working together that night or the next morning or whatever. Like it's, there's always, we unloaded a cargo container Christmas Eve. So it was, my big plan was just 2 days off. I'll take Christmas Eve off and Christmas off. Couldn't even pull that off. Had to unload a cargo container Christmas Eve, and there was other work to do. So, I will say this: when I can take time off, I come back extra creative. So it's like, oh, let's shoot some videos. Let's do this. It's when you're never taking a break, I find it's like, ugh, now I gotta go film. Now I gotta do this. And so if I can build those breaks in when it makes sense, I'm gonna try to do that. How many gallons for an Amazon puffer? I would say, as of today, 40 gallons or more. Could be less, could be more, could be a different setup. But signs of under and overfeeding. Take a look at your fish. Do they look bloated? Might be overfeeding. Is there extra food on the ground? Might be overfeeding. Are they losing weight? They're getting a pinched in belly. Could be underfed. Could be outcompeted by another fish. Could be parasites. Even something as simple as that, multiple things for each of them. So, hard to know. All right, well, those of you that are still around, hanging out, if you want to go find some new fish friends, we're going to head over to the Steamfod Aquatics channel. I think he's got some announcements to make today. I'll be hanging out there. Usually I've got it in my ear, and the first thing I always do, I run to the bathroom. Got to do that. It's been a couple hours, Then I come back and I put it in my ear and I do work. So I'm there, and I'll talk every once in a while, but a lot of times you guys are like, hey, Corey, answer this. And it's like, well, I'm focusing, and I don't want to sidetrack too much from any other presenter. But if you go to Steamfod Aquatics channel, he'll be live streaming, and I'll be hanging out there, and I chime in every once in a while, and it's just another way to have some fish in your ear. And I would tell you, these live streams, while they're great for the creator, when you're in live chat like this, really, I think you guys should be focusing on developing a good rapport with other people in the chat, because you can always just listen to a live stream, driving to work, whatever, but if you're sitting there actively engaged, you ask Carolyn Sharp, she says, I don't know why. There are plenty of fish keepers, though. Like, oh, what are you talking about, Carolyn? And actually develop a rapport with this person. Maybe see him next time. And maybe you get a fish pen pal, and then, it goes from there. So that's why I can sit in live streams, and I don't always talk because I don't want to necessarily make it, oh, hey, Corey, and all that. I don't want to detract from someone presenting something, because I go into stuff all the time to learn. So just see what other people's thoughts are, and go, oh, I wonder, I should try that out. So send Bob some good thoughts. Hashtag, what did he eat something this week? I'm trying to think if we went camping and he ate something that he didn't think he was going to like. I don't know, but we'll do hashtag maple bacon. I was introduced to that this weekend, and it was mind-blowing. It was more like candy than bacon. He brought some maple bacon, and it was phenomenally good. Like, it was too good. I could eat a pound of maple bacon, I think, because it's like eating candy. So hashtag maple bacon. Head on over to the Steamfod Aquatics. I'll be there in a few minutes after I run to the bathroom. Thank you for all the super chats, all the new members, and for hanging out. And don't forget, we got new videos coming out later this week.